Hi, I'm Jake, and today I have a special guest with me to talk about Warhammer tournaments in general, as well as what it takes to start one. If you're new to the channel, what I do here is primarily cover competitive 40K content and host fun and informative battle reports, because fun is important.
Absolutely.
It is absolutely important. If you'd like to stay up to date on content like this, and if it interests you, you can stay subscribed as well as support the channel in any way you would like. This is actually a fantastic topic for such a talk show, and thank you so much for coming on for the first talk show, because we've recently been sponsored by Frontline Gaming, who hosts amazing events. Right?
Yeah, the best.
I think you've heard of them.
Yeah. That's why I'm here for this weekend.
Right.
Yeah.
So allow me to introduce Matt from Arizona, Smite Club co-captain. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi. So my name's Matt Baugh. I've been playing Warhammer 40,000 for 18 years. I've been involved in tournaments almost all that time, going to them, running them. I've been involved with Adepticon for a number of years as a volunteer. There was a period of time where I was running the championship GT at Adepticon.
Very nice.
I started a club and a series of tournaments while I lived in Missouri. And now I live in Phoenix, where I've joined the local traveling 40K team Smite Club. And I've gotten involved in our series of GTs, which our next one is the Scorched Open, coming up March 12th and 13th, and that'll be 64 players in Mesa, Arizona.
That's amazing. So what you're saying is you've been around the block a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Not to age yourself or anything,
Yeah.
but as soon as you say, I've been doing this for X amount of time.
Yeah. So I'll leave it a secret how old I was when I started.
Right.
And so we can't pinpoint exactly how old I am.
I have a deceptively baby face.
Yeah.
Always have, probably always will be.
Yeah.
But as soon as I say oh yeah, when I collected my first army about 19, 20 years ago, it's like,
Yeah.
What were you, 3?
Yeah.
Not quite though. So I have some questions for you, Matt, because you're gearing up for Scorched Earth Open, SEO, aka SEO 2022, and this is, I believe you said your 6th event, right?
Yeah, it will be the 6th time for the Scorched Earth Open. Yeah, we have a number of other GTs that the club runs, but this one specifically, it's our 6th time.
Awesome. Very cool. And, that's big kudos to continuously running an event. That's not easy by any measure. And, we're going to dive into kind of a little bit more details as to why. So if it's okay with you, I just want to lob you some questions that kind of we thought of, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So why shouldn't a new player be afraid to attend a tournament event?
Yeah, so I think that sometimes tournaments, especially if you hear the word competitive, right, it has a stigma to it that's largely undeserved.
Right.
There are occasionally, the stories, and what everybody worries about is getting, the player who is very nitpicky on the rules, who's just not agreeable, and you pay money to go and have fun, and then, the worry is those players will take your fun away for the weekend. My experience, having done this hundreds of times over decades now, is those players are just a far, far minority.
I couldn't agree with you more. So I'm relatively new to the competitive 40K scene. I mean, when I jumped back into the hobby, that was only, I want to say the latter part of 2018, or actually maybe 2019. The last 2 years have been a blur for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But definitely, it does come with a stigma, so I can completely relate to that. You're not alone, and even for viewers of this channel, I'm pumping out a lot of competitive content, but that's just from gaining the experience and participating at a competitive level.
Yeah.
And I can honestly say within all the events, RTTs, GTs, majors, even super majors that I've been to, I have not actually interacted with one single negative player.
Yeah.
So, and I've not been to nearly as many as individuals like yourself or others, but it is so far and few in between.
I couldn't agree more. So, I mean, I've interacted with most of the so-called competitive 40K players, and so have between myself and my teammates on Smite Club, we've interacted with all of them, and just by and large, they're nice people. They want to have a good game. They want to share their skills and their knowledge with people, and they want newer, less competitive people at the tournaments. That benefits everybody because the tournaments get larger. It gives them, they enjoy sharing what they know with new people, and I think new people should not be afraid at all. Tournaments, even if they market themselves as competitive, they want you, they want new people, and everybody should try them out.
Not to drag this subject along for too long, but the last thing I want to share about this is so LSO, so Lone Star Open was actually my first really big one. Okay, I did okay. I impressed myself for the first big one, but it was also the first time, and we've coincidentally kept in touch since, but first time actually interacting with and playing a really top level player, and that was Sean Naden.
Yeah.
So even to this day, we exchange some messages and stuff. But I wasn't quite sure what to expect, other than knowing that I think at the time he was like the #1 ITC ranked player. So here I am, like, oh yeah, I scored like max points day one. Let's go, let's grind. And then it's like, okay, day two, I'm starting to play the Scouring with Sean Naden. It's like, okay, I don't know what to expect. And he was so patient. I knew my rules, but like he was so patient, and he actually it seems like they want to help players that are entering the tournament scene do better and like learn a little bit and understand that for the most part everybody's pretty cool.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
So I had to give him the shout out because like I haven't actually mentioned him in many. All right, so next up, what makes for a good local GT? And just to clarify, a GT as of current right now, it is rated at 26 players or more. What's the benchmark for major?
It's in the 50s.
56 or give or take, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so a GT, a grand tournament, is at that scale, so you're going to interact a lot, not quite as much as majors. But what makes for a good local GT?
Yeah, so I think when you're running a smaller tournament, especially in that 20 to 30 some player range, there are two things that I really look for, right? I look for tournaments that can have enough terrain. That's always a major issue, especially when you're starting out, right? The game is just better with more terrain. You need to have a certain amount of it for everyone to have a good time. So just enough terrain. And then the second thing that I look for is, I don't want the format to be too wonky and crazy. Like there's a lot of value, I think, especially when you're smaller and starting out, in just using what is standard and what people know and expect. That lowers barriers to entry.
Rather than like TO, like kind of house rules type of?
Yeah. So some examples that you'll find if you go around to smaller events is, maybe this was more popular in the past, but tournament organizers would have like unique, crazy rules related to terrain. So like I've been to tournaments where like the terrain attacked you on the board, right? And stuff like that. And that's fun for a certain group of people.
The narrative events.
Yeah. It does increase the complexity of the game. It increases the knowledge barrier to the game, and it generally makes it harder to participate. And so, from my point of view, a good local tournament will have enough terrain and will keep the format fairly simple and standard, so everybody understands the expectations and you don't layer on artificial barriers to people coming and playing in your event.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what's really big is having the event packet released in time for sure, because everything is, at least a well-run event, everything is laid out. So, whether there's a regional difference of how terrain, because, I couldn't agree with you more. Terrain is so crucial to a tournament event, right? Because that's like half of the game.
Yeah.
But having all that laid out in the tournament packet and reading it is just key. Because just because you attend, like 5, 6, 10 events a year, they might all be operated by different entities. So couldn't agree with you more. So Matt, how would you go about, or how would anybody go about putting together their own local tournament, whether it's an RTT where it's under the 25 people or under the 26 people, or a GT? How would one get started in that?
Yeah, so RTTs are probably, they're obviously the easier thing to start. My recommendations would be find a store that wants to partner with you and wants to build up your community, and just pick a date and just do it. Just start it, right? And if you advertise it at the store, advertise it on social media, you might not have as many people at first as you want, but it will build and it will grow. When it comes to the larger, like 2-day events, the grand tournaments and the majors, the major recommendation is going to be, or the major challenge is going to be finding a venue, right? So you can host those in stores. if a store will let you hang out for 2 days over the whole weekend. But my recommendation would be just get creative, right? So I've been to grand tournaments that were at American Legions, that were at union halls, that were at high schools. They've been at restaurants, like whatever you have available and whatever connections you can leverage to find a neat or unique venue space, right? Use those. And yeah, be creative. Not every tournament has to happen at a hotel conference room. And in fact, when you're starting out, that might not be the best place because those tend to be very expensive. So my suggestion would be just creative and think outside the box and leverage what contacts and resources that you have already.
Yeah, definitely. And those are prime examples because one of our other channel sponsors, War Room Games out here, which is a local game store, they definitely like to support the community. And they did like an invitational, which I wasn't able to make. This was a couple years ago, but they actually did it at a restaurant at the Venetian.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if any of your crew went to that.
I didn't make that, but a lot of our team members went to that one.
Yeah, but it was such a cool concept to me. Like you would never think a restaurant on the strip is somewhere you're going to go play, a little mini round event.
So our co-captain, Eric, he was involved with the Nova for many years in the past. And my understanding, somebody can send me a message if I'm wrong, is that the Nova, right, it's one of the larger tournaments in the country, started out basically in the back room at a bar.
Oh, wow.
Right? So, like, start with what you have. Start small,
yep.
and if you do it well, it'll grow.
At least they had access to beer in the
there's advantages to having it in a bar. So yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's a great segue to the next question, and there's definitely some clear disparities between the cost to the tournament player in attending such events. So, you and I both well know the venue makes the biggest difference as to what the cost of the ticket or the entry might be. But what do you think is fair? What do you think a fair cost is to participate in a GT?
Yeah, so this is a super tough subject in a giant can of worms. You're right. The venue is the single largest budget item by a lot. And a lot of other things like prize support, you can find people who are willing to donate that,
right? Or
people who are willing to sell you product at cost. So like you can play with the prize support dollar amount. The venue costs, especially when you're small, places aren't usually willing to negotiate, and you're talking thousands of dollars.
Right.
So how this all relates to the cost of the tournament, you have two factors. On one side, you have venue attendees, right, who would like an amazing tournament for
value,
very little, right, which is totally understandable.
It's fair,
yeah. And on the other side, you have kind of the economic reality that the TO who is investing hundreds of hours into the tournament, and then behind the tournament organizer, there's probably an army of volunteers who are working on terrain and just setting up and tearing everything down. And if you had to pay all of those people, the ticket price for a tournament would be $500, right?
Right.
Tournaments only exist because of the volunteer labor contributed to them. And that exists from small to large tournaments. So the philosophy that we've tried to take with the Scorched Earth Open and our events is to try and kind of thread the needle in the middle. So the ticket price for the Scorched Earth Open is $50. With that, we're providing between what we're spending and contributions, somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000 in prize support.
Wow.
So a very large chunk of what we're taking in is going right back out. We have like a decent venue, right? And we're paying for it through our contributions to the Arizona Game Fair, which is our host venue for the tournament. And so what we've tried to do is we have kind of a moderately priced ticket around $50, which if you think about you would get a full weekend of entertainment. I don't know any other thing you can do for an entire weekend for $50.
Exactly.
Right? And we've tried to leverage that revenue and that income into buying things in bulk and getting more value out of that $50 than you could get just spending it yourself.
Right.
So that's our philosophy. It's totally valid to run tournaments on the extreme cheap end and have a $20 or $30 ticket, right? But then cheaper venues, less price
Yeah.
support, etc.
And at
right?
the end of
That's
it,
just
you
the
don't want
reality.
to lose money. You know,
Yeah.
trying to do something you love, because that's feel bad.
Yeah, almost every tournament, especially when you're starting out, is gonna lose money in the
Right.
first few years. And if you count your labor, right, like they're a massive loss.
Yeah, maybe don't count the time you.
Yeah, you can't. You don't want to think about that.
Right.
Yeah, but you know, eventually, I think most of the medium to small tournaments break even or have like a small profit, and by small I mean like a few $100s, right? So whatever they're charging, odds are that the tournament organizer is putting almost all of that back into the event, and sometimes a lot more as well.
I must say the price. I was not expecting the $50 for a GT price point. That is incredible. Like, just for the record, that is very, very reasonable.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so as well. So like, not to compare, but we've got 5 games over the course of the weekend for $50. You know, a lot of events, 5 games. The going rate for per game is somewhere around like $15-ish dollars. So kind of an equivalently long tournament. Most other places would be $60 to $75. So.
Yeah, I was going to mention a regional difference potentially too. You know, like obviously, like renting out a place, you know, in Delaware or just somewhere kind of where it's not like a tourist destination, compared to somewhere like Arizona or even versus Vegas, because I hear this question come up a lot. Given you guys are in town for LVO right now, that's kind of the number one thing. Like, look, for the 40K champ side alone, it's a 1,000+ player event. Okay, so to house this many, and that's just 40K. You know, so then things come up like where hosting at a casino resort like the Rio, they have union food and beverage minimums. They have laws kind of surrounding this. They have hotel block minimums in order to pass on softer costs. So I would say definitely regionally that justifies why prices might be a little bit more, a little bit less. But from what I've seen, you kind of get what you pay for. Just to support what you were saying, like if you want to charge $20 for a GT, you're gonna get a $20 product. You charge $100, for a GT. I guess the expectation gets higher. But I would say that's more than justified for like a venue like Vegas in a casino.
Yeah, I was very happy to pay $100 to come to the LVO, by the way.
Right.
I think for like a premier level event, right, that like the LVO is something that you build your schedule around for the year, and people budget for it, and it's part of just their entertainment for what they do. So I think the value that you get out of that $100 ticket here is incredible. When you're starting out and you're small, you're probably not going to be able to provide $100 in value to somebody, right? Or if you charge a $100 ticket, you're going to be compared to what somebody would get at LVO, LSO, Atlantic City Open, any of the other like major ITC events, or Adepticon or Nova, any of the other big cons. So, my suggestion would be, when you're starting out, is do something like we did and just kind of try and go down the middle, right? Like, have a moderately priced ticket and just try and stretch that dollar as far as you possibly can.
Very nice. Okay, so Matt, if it's okay with you, so we recently started a Black Rabbit Gaming Discord channel. Not quite sure where it's going, but if anything, it's just been a really good avenue for a lot of the viewers, the ones that are interested in kind of interacting with the channel operators a little bit more. And what's been great is I've kind of been sharing like sneak peeks, like, hey, we've got a guest coming on. What kind of questions would you ask? Like yesterday, I don't know when this one's going to come out in relation, but we had Steven Box from Vanguard Tactics come on, and it's like, hey, well, what do you guys think? What do you want to ask him, right? Without overwhelming guests, of course. But I have a few questions that people wanted to ask you, if you don't mind.
Absolutely, this is great.
So the first one is from Timothy Boutte. He asks how you can build local communities to support tournaments, and secondly, how much lead time is needed for proper marketing in order to ensure the success of your tournament.
Sure. So 2 questions there. The first one, I literally had to do this. I left my hometown and moved out of state where there really wasn't a 40K scene, and I had to just kind of start one from scratch. So my suggestion here, I mentioned it earlier, find a store who wants to partner with you, who will let you run RTTs. Schedule your RTTs for 6 months out, and then post it, advertise it, and then be reliable, right? Don't change the dates. Like, you've set the dates, commit to them, and show up, and keep showing up. keep running the RTT so that people know that they can count on you and that they can count on those dates, and the growth will happen.
And just the familiarity, I would imagine. You keep seeing the same
Yes.
people and rolling dice, sharing tactics. I think that'd be a key to building kind of a community, because there are so many pockets in the U.S. alone where you hear all the time, I don't really have that many players to play with. So in that regards, I think it's consistency of just kind of like planning stuff, even if it's at your house or a game store. Any other kind of tips on that? Because at the end of the day, we want to grow the community as players.
Yeah. I mean, just so if you can, so when I had to do this in Missouri, I was a very busy time in my life, and I didn't have the ability to be in the store like for a weekly game night. If you can supplement your tournament schedule with a weekly game night, that's even better. But again, I think consistency is the key, right? It's worse to set up a weekly game night and then be inconsistent than it is to just not have the weekly game night, because people will learn that you're inconsistent, right? So if you make a commitment, stick to it. People will figure that out about you. People will figure that out about your events, and that you're a reliable place where they can come find great 40K.
I think I know where you went wrong. We play 40K. Why do you think that you are supposed to have a life?
Oh! Yes, I have a wife and children. I have other priorities, unfortunately.
They kind of need a little bit of attention. I'm in the same boat. Not quite as much. You've got me on the numbers. I should say. We were joking about that.
The second part of that question, though, about lead time for marketing, I think that's just going to depend. So, like for an RTT, a few weeks to a month. But like I said, if you're trying to build a community, I would schedule those out for 6-month blocks, right? So people have lots of lead time. For the larger events, GTs, it really depends. Like the major tournaments, Adepticons, LVOs, right? They schedule those out a year or more in advance. I would say for a smaller GT, probably 6 months in advance, to allow people to adjust their travel schedules and to line up your sponsors and your advertising and everything seems pretty reasonable to me.
Real quick, I'm going to expand on Timothy's question because it kind of opens up a little bit more. So BCP, Best Coast Pairings, for instance, that's kind of like the go-to for event schedules. Would you line that up with the event promotion schedule? Like as soon as you promote your event, would you pop it into BCP so people can see things 6 months out?
Certainly, if you start advertising an event and people can't find it on BCP, they're going to ask questions. They're going to wonder if your event's actually happening. They're going to be unsure of what's going on. So if you're promoting it on Facebook, Instagram, whatever your social media is, I would have it in BCP already as well.
Very nice. For Moses asks, what the best way for players to help make the tournaments go smooth?
Oh, that's a
very wholesome question.
Yeah, it is.
Don't be a dick.
Yeah, I was trying to think of a nice way to say that. Yeah, you're gonna have questions obviously be nice to your opponents. That's probably the biggest thing.
And the TOs.
Yeah, so that was the second one that I was gonna say. Just understand that your TOs have invested a lot of time. Usually they're putting in their own personal money to make these things happen, and they're there just because they love the hobby and they love tournaments. And so if they give you a rules ruling that maybe you don't agree with, or there's just something about it that isn't quite the way you would want it, just be a little compassionate and understanding, and that will go a very, very long way.
Mitchell Kane, ooh, this is a good one, asks how to deal with players who think competitive play is a negative thing. He generally ignores their comments, but most of the players in his area are casual and won't play more than once with the select few who are actually interested in playing competitive 40K by saying things like, yeah, I'm not going to be playing against that again.
Oh, this is a tough one. I think that you just kind of have to read your local community and your local group. I don't know that you can give a blanket answer to this. If the only people that you have to play with, like if you're in like a very small town and the only other people who play 40K, they don't want to play the latest Drukari build, or they don't want to play 5 Dread Knights, right? and those are the only games that you can possibly get, maybe you make concessions. And I've had to do that with people who don't want to play against the latest meta list. That's just kind of an interpersonal thing that everybody has to figure out for themselves. My suggestion to you would be, if you do want to play the latest meta builds and you do want to chase that dragon, so to speak, start that type of community in your area, right? Start tournaments that cater to those people. My suspicion is those people are around you, even if it's a small town. Or you can find people who you could, like, maybe they don't understand 40K, but they could be turned into those kinds of play partners for you. So if you don't find exactly quite the community that suits your needs, start it. Start it and be consistent, and it will grow.
Based on your example, I guess I'm exempt because I've only ran 4 NDKs in my lists. So I'm right on the cusp, right? And then our last question from our Discord is from Finney. He asks, he also happens to organize local events in his area.
Great.
Yep. He hasn't been able to do so, I believe, due to COVID, just because we kind of chat back and forth. So he's asking, with a new set of tournament secondaries, according to GW, being introduced every 6 months, how that poses an issue with tournament operators and having to work out all the issues for judging fairly at events.
Sure. So I think this connects to a larger topic of just the frequency of releases that Games Workshop has had over the last really kind of 2 editions. The constant new material certainly makes things harder for rules judging. The burden, the amount of time and effort that you have to put in to keep up on the rules, all the funny rules interactions, the latest frequently asked questions, right? It's higher now, certainly, than it used to be.
Yeah.
And that's inarguably made it harder.
Yeah.
I think the net benefit is the game's more interesting, and it's evolving all the time, and it's trending, towards a more balanced and interesting game. And I think that's worth it. But I don't know any other answer than it's harder to be a judge now than it was in previous editions, where you got 2 or 3 codexes a year and 1 FAQ a year.
Yeah, and that's an immense amount of knowledge to hold as a TO and a judge, is because even with as much as 9th edition alone has changed since release, there's still interactions with 8th edition codex, with 8th edition supplements that interact with 9th edition rules, which interact with 9th edition like Army of Renowns.
Yep.
So I can only imagine that's a pretty big strain on tournament operators, but I would imagine that you guys stay pretty up to date on it. Like have your own set of kind of clarifications.
We do. So what's interesting is it's gotten both it's mostly gotten harder to be a rules judge, but in some ways it's gotten easier. So in 6th and 7th edition, I was involved with Adepticon, and Adepticon was coordinating with Frontline Gaming and the ITC at the time to have sort of a unified FAQ between the two. And so if you ever looked at the FAQ document for the ITC during 6th or 7th edition, the original of that document was on my laptop. Nice. I was actually the guy writing that document. And we would spend so many hours arguing the minutia of rules interactions in 6th and 7th edition, when you only had 1 GW FAQ a year and you only had 3 codexes a year, right? So we had to dump an incredible amount of time in making our own FAQs and support for the community. Nowadays, things have gotten harder because there's a new codex every month, and there's FAQs, it seems like, every month, right? So there's an immense volume to keep up on. But the amount of original content that we have to create as rules judges has gone way, way down. GW is just doing a far better job stewarding the game and answering questions. So I suppose that from that perspective, we don't have to have 4-hour rules conference calls anymore. They're down to like an hour.
There's a meme that comes to mind as you're like stressing out, wigged out, trying to like balance all these. It's definitely going to get overlaid.
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you to the Discord members for providing these questions. We didn't even think of any of.
Yeah.
Like these are very, very, very specific, and that is what I've loved most about the kind of interactions going on in the Discord. So a link will be in the description if you care to partake and interact. But yeah, on that note, tell us, Matt, the dates, the details. So I think people are going to have a good idea of like what to expect just based on what you're saying. We already know you're charging $50.
Yeah.
So yeah, just tell us more about Scorched Earth 2022.
Yeah, so a couple of things. Our preliminary rules packet is available online. So if you want to find us, you can go on Facebook and search Scorched Earth Open.
We'll post the link.
Yeah. We'll have the link directly to the event. We are part of the Arizona Games Fair, which is just a large gaming convention in Mesa, Arizona. So there'll be a miniatures hall where there's going to be 40K and Age of Sigmar, but there's also going to be a lot of other things to do. So if you like D&D, you like board games, any of that kind of stuff, you can come to the whole fair for the weekend and play 40K for a couple of days or just hang out. We are almost sold out. It's going to be a pretty successful year for us. We are expanding a little bit, but if you're interested, I suggest that you check us out and get tickets soon because we will hit capacity, and we've already tapped into our overflow space.
That's awesome. Congratulations on that.
Thanks. Yeah.
Now this is what I get. I procrastinate on getting tickets, and good thing I know a guy. I would never abuse my relationships.
No, of course not. Yeah.
Well, that's it for today, folks. Matt, thank you so much for coming on and answering these questions. It's great to take a peek behind the scenes for a hobby that we love. And you have the reputation, the experience behind you. So yeah, thanks so much for sharing this with our viewers. And I'll catch you guys next time.